The Counterweight. This video is for August 10th, 2026. Welcome to yes2hellwith.com. Over the series of videos that we've created, we have followed one question. If the Constitution limits government, where does the ordinary citizen receive the practical benefits of those limits? We began with the administrative tribunal. A citizen raises a constitutional objection, and the response is, I don't decide constitutional questions. Government proceeds and the citizen suffers the consequences. And the constitutional question may be pushed somewhere else to another proceeding, another court, another appeal, another year, another attorney perhaps, and a lot of money, time, and resources. That leads us to the question underneath this entire video series. Where and what is the counterweight? If the administrative system possesses the institutions, personnel, money, and physical power to enforce its decisions immediately, what protects the freedom of the people when that system crosses the constitutional boundary? And when does it protect immediately? There are four parts to the answer, perhaps more. We'll isolate on four. The people, the Second Amendment, the Declaration of Independence, and the sheriff willing to stand in the gap and say no. Let's examine them. The people. Everything begins here. We, the people. Government did not create the people created government. Government was entrusted with certain delegated powers for certain purposes, and outside those delegated powers remain an enormous sphere of human freedom. But that relationship only works if the people understand it. If the people do not know where the boundary lies, how will they know when it has been crossed? That is why the first counterweight is not an institution. It is an informed people. People willing to ask, what is your authority? Where did it come from? What jurisdiction do you possess? What obligation does the law actually impose upon me? And what authorizes you to enforce it? Those are not radical questions. Those are questions a free people should ask anyone exercising government power. Which brings us to the second counterweight, the Second Amendment. The framers understood something history has repeatedly demonstrated. Government ultimately possesses coercive power. A regulation is merely paper until someone enforces it, as is an administrative order or a warrant. Behind government authority ultimately stands physical force. And the American constitutional structure did not contemplate a population rendered completely powerless before that force. The Second Amendment declares, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That right is not permission for lawlessness. It does not authorize violence because someone disagrees with a regulation, judge, tax, or official. But neither should we pretend that the Second Amendment was included in the Bill of Rights without a purpose. An armed people represents something fundamental to the architecture of freedom. The people were never intended to become helpless subjects of the government they created. But there is something even more fundamental. It was written 15 years before the Bill of Rights. The Declaration of Independence. Before there was a Constitution, Americans announced the principle upon which legitimate government rests. Governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Notice the direction of authority. It travels upward from the people to the government. And the Declaration says that when government becomes destructive to the ends for which it was established, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. That does not mean every political disagreement justifies revolution. The Declaration itself counsels prudence, but it establishes the ultimate relationship Government is the creation. The people are the creators. And that brings us to the fourth counterweight, the one closest to home, the sheriff. Imagine an administrative command arriving in your county. Seize this property, enter this land, remove this person. Someone eventually has to carry out that command into the physical world. And at that moment, an extraordinary question arises. Does the person being asked to exercise that power have any responsibility to determine whether the authority actually exists? This is where the informed sheriff enters the conversation. Not an all-powerful sheriff, not a sheriff who invents his own law, not a sheriff who stands above the Constitution. Quite the opposite. A sheriff who understands that he stands beneath it. A sheriff who understands his oath, the source of his authority, and its limits. Someone says, "Seize this man's property." The informed sheriff asks, "Under what authority?" "Enter this property." "Where is the lawful jurisdiction?" "Remove this person." "Show me the lawful basis." And if the authority cannot be demonstrated, if the jurisdiction cannot be established, if the constitutional boundary has been crossed, then perhaps one of the most important words available to a public official is also one of the simplest, and that is no. I will not participate, not because I am above the law, but because I am bound by it. That is what it means to stand in the gap. And standing behind that sheriff is something vastly more important than an administrative agency. It is an informed people. We can finally answer the question, what is the counterweight? It is not another administrative office or another regulation or procedure buried deep inside the machinery. The counterweight ultimately rests outside that machinery. An informed people, the Second Amendment, the Declaration of Independence, and the people's ultimate authority to alter or abolish government that becomes destructive to its legitimate purposes, and an informed and courageous sheriff willing to stand in the gap and say no when government power exceeds its lawful boundary. These four ideas reinforce one another. A sheriff without an informed people may stand alone. An informed people without courageous public officers may understand the problem, but possess no immediate resistance when government power arrives at their door. The Second Amendment ensures the people were never intended to become completely powerless. And the Declaration of Independence reminds everyone of the ultimate relationship. Government serves the people. The people do not serve government. That is the counterweight. And now we arrive where the Liberty Dialogues began, with questions. When someone exercises power against you, ask, what is your authority? Where is your jurisdiction? What obligation have I incurred? What authorizes your enforcement? And what presumption are you asking me to accept? Those questions matter because freedom disappears quietly when nobody asks them. The Constitution cannot preserve itself, the Declaration cannot preserve itself, and the Second Amendment cannot preserve itself. And the office of sheriff cannot preserve freedom by itself. All ultimately depend upon the same thing: a knowledgeable, courageous, and vigilant people, a people who understand the boundary, a people who recognize when it has been crossed, and public officers courageous enough to stand beside them and say, this far and no further. And that is the answer. The people, the Second Amendment, the Declaration of Independence, and the sheriff willing to stand in the gap. And as always, may truth reign supreme.